We did a lot of cycling in and around Montreal during the pandemic, but almost all of it was recreational. With work from home and lots of things shut down, there just weren't a lot of places we needed to go, meaning that most of our cycling was exercise or exploring. That's why we were excited recently to have a specific, necessary destination to bike to, our vaccine appointments. We picked the vaccination centers with the earliest time slots, so we can use these semi-random destinations in central Montreal as a test or demonstration of the city's bike infrastructure for utility cycling.
My appointment was at the new University of Montreal campus at the edge of Outremont, which is just under a 4-kilometer bike ride from where we live in the plateau. We started with a half-kilometer stretch on Villeneuve, which only has painted share roads for cyclists, but it doesn't really matter because it's a slow, low-traffic street where drivers are used to bikes. We then turned right onto Clark, which is an excellent two-way cycle track with wide concrete separation and low traffic volumes, at least for most of the 1.5-kilometer stretch that we rode on it. This residential street passes through some important commercial streets in Montreal's Mile End neighborhood, including Fairmount and St. Viateur of Montreal bagel shop fame. At the end of Clark, we did some sharp turns to go onto the train tracks and end up on La Piste des Carrières, a multifunctional trail in linear park following alongside freight rail tracks. On this trip, we were only on this trail for a third of a kilometer, but it goes on for another few kilometers in the other direction, and it's a pleasant and useful neighborhood connector. Unfortunately, at the very western end, this well-used trail just ends, throwing you onto a car-dominated stretch of Beaubien, which is an obvious gap in Montreal's bike network. We've had some bad experiences with aggressive drivers here, so it's one of the places we sometimes choose to ride on the sidewalk depending on the traffic levels. Fortunately, this only lasted for about half a kilometer, and it's a better experience once you get to the University of Montreal's new development, whose wide elevated bike lanes took us to the vaccination center set up on campus. We saw numerous other people arrive at this vaccine center on bike, although of course people arrived by foot, transit, and car too. Overall, Montreal's bike infrastructure served this trip well, except for the embarrassing gap of Beaubien.
My appointment was further away, at a church in Pointe-Saint-Charles, which is around an 8-kilometer bike ride from home in the opposite direction. We planned our trip to take some key routes that you've seen featured on this channel before, especially the always pleasant Rev on St-Denis and the pretty good two-way cycle track on Berri. There ended up being construction on Berri, but there were signs set up to separate cyclists from pedestrians when possible. After almost 4 kilometers on these routes, we ended up in Old Montreal, which has a few different paths allowing pedestrians and cyclists to avoid car traffic, although it's one of the main tourist destinations of the city, it can get crowded at certain times. We continued through Old Montreal to end up on the Lachine Canal, which has the same advantage of keeping you well away from cars, and the same disadvantage that it can get pretty busy at peak hours. Maybe that's a lesson that people like places and routes free from cars. The very last stretch to get to my appointment was on Island Street in Pointe-Saint-Charles, which has been redone with traffic calming measures and pedestrian amenities as part of the city's Shared Streets initiative. The project is taking place in a few stages, so what you see here is not the final version. There were actually lots of residences on the street with signs against the project, which is surprising because Montrealers, at least in the central city, tend to be pretty supportive of initiatives for pedestrians and cyclists. The opposition is based around a Facebook page, which we checked out to try to better understand their concerns, but the most concrete issues that we can see are related to confusing signage and subpar snow removal. Anyway, we were happy with the street for the purposes of getting us to this appointment. My appointment trip of 8 kilometers was pretty well served at Montreal's bike infrastructure, and at basically no point did we have to contend with cars. One issue to mention though is that we intentionally went around downtown to use the routes we knew to be pleasant, which added a bit of distance. For science, on another day we did the same trip but took a more direct route through downtown, and it wasn't enjoyable. Instead of the comfortable ride on St-Denis, we fought with buses and cement trucks on a completely unprotected painted lane in St-Urbain. There are very real bike infrastructure gaps in downtown, particularly if you're traveling to the water, although the planned express bike corridor on Peel should help with this.
Thanks for watching our informal test of Montreal's bike network. We're just excited in general with the pace of vaccination in Canada, and we thought of these rides as marking the beginning of the world going back to normal, with the return of utility cycling where we actually have places to bike to and we can't choose the route purely based on enjoyment. Although through all of this, we've been well aware that being able to work from home is a luxury not everyone has.